What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Crush City Territory. My name is Chandler Rome with Tyler Stafford. And Tyler, we have a special guest today.
We sure do. We got a buddy of mine here, Bobby Wagner. You know him from The Ringer, from the Tipping Pitches podcast, from the Museum of Modern Art screening of Daisy Miller on a Thursday night in New York City. Yeah, Bobby's here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. This is so much fun. I love to be in enemy territory to start a baseball season, so I'm so honored to be here.
Yeah, how are you feeling about this? Bobby is a Mets fan. Bobby is up in New York and certified ball knower. And yeah, how are you feeling? I feel like this has got to be the best you felt in ever, maybe, for a Mets team.
Yeah, well, if you stretch the window back to, I guess, basically August of last year, it's been going too well for too long, and that part of my brain that's been trained by, I think all baseball fans feel this way, that they expect failure to come because it is a game so predicated on failure. But when that failure has stretched to the organizational level the way that it has with the Mets in my lifetime, I was born 10 years after their last World Series win, so still waiting, still trying to go to the grave with at least just one World Series ring. But I mean, I would be selfish to say that I don't feel good right now just because of everything that's been going on. Not sure if you guys saw, they signed a couple players this offseason for a little bit of money, so feeling good about that. Excited to see the lineup. The rotation, maybe we'll get into that a little bit on this series preview with the Stros. There's some question marks, maybe more question marks than any other kind of periods or exclamation points, but we'll see.
What are you talking about? Clay Holmes is going to win the Cy Young. You got money down on him yet?
Betting on baseball is certainly not my forte, Tyler. No, I'm not super smart, but I'm smart enough to know not to let myself bet on baseball.
Yeah, smart.
Bobby, you mentioned the Mets and their well-documented failures, and their well-documented just kind of making their fans miserable. It seemed like they were on their way to that last year. They started 22-33 after they got swept by the Dodgers. We watched in Houston, the Astros started 7-19, 12-22, and we know how they turned it around. How did the Mets turn it around last year after being 11 under 500 and kind of looking like this was going to be another in a long, long line of miserable Mets seasons?
I mean, it starts quite literally at the top of the lineup when Francisco Lindor moved into the leadoff spot. You can quibble over whether or not that stuff actually matters from an analytical perspective, but something changed in his season when he moved into that slot. Now, he's historically been a slow starter just in his major league career, and definitely since he's come aboard with the Mets. But when they made that change, it also happened to coincide with a lot of the vibes stuff that I think a lot of the national fans sort of are more aware of, the grimaced first pitch and the June turnaround for their Pride Night game, a lot of these things that turned their season around. But I think that Lindor really stepping into that role as the genuine leader of the team and also having his best season maybe in his career, but certainly with the Mets, was the thing that got it going. And then everything kind of fell in line from that point. They got a lot of patchwork starting pitching from guys who, maybe were sort of 50-50. You would have hoped that a couple of them would have worked out and a couple of them wouldn't. And kind of all of them sort of worked out last year. David Stearns has been well known for his ability to get the most out of particularly starting pitchers who have maybe been journeymen or who have not had the right pitch mix in their MLB career so up to this point. But Peterson looked amazing. Minaya obviously had that change halfway through the season where he started pitching like Chris Sale. It's crazy, guys. If you just try to pitch like Chris Sale, maybe it'll work out for you a little bit better. And then what they did with Severino, I think really it was a formula that worked for them last year, a little bit more piecemeal than you would expect from a team that was running a $300 million payroll. But that kind of is what it is at this point. They're carrying a lot of contracts, and their owner is clearly willing to, invest around the edges where it needs to be done. So I honestly don't have a great explanation for how it worked out other than everybody kind of just hit their 80 to 85% projection for the year from one specific point on, which is bizarre, but it's baseball.
there's a lot there that you said that I think, reflects onto the 2025 season. We can talk about that in a little bit. But one thing, I think that Astros fans will not be able to relate to is having an owner in Steve Cohen who will do whatever it takes, who can blow past. They named a tax threshold after Steve Cohen for the amount of money he spends.
They sure did.
If you survey Astros fans, Jim Crane is certainly not cheap. We're not going to sit here and say Jim Crane is cheap. They have run a top 5 payroll in baseball the last 3 or 4 years. They exceeded the luxury tax last year for the first time in his ownership tenure. But this year they are being pretty adamant just by their actions that they want to stay under it, that, they didn't go sign an outfielder this offseason. Instead, they moved their franchise second baseman to left field. They signed Christian Walker, but they let Alex Bregman walk. What is it like to have an owner that just throws caution to the wind and will spend whatever it takes to get his team where it needs to be?
I mean, I think it's freeing in particular when you combine it with the fact that they now have a front office that is in lockstep with just any kind of momentum of moving forward. It feels like for the first time, at least in my adult baseball watching life, that field level, front office level, and ownership are rowing in the same direction, so to speak. But as a fan, emotionally, it just feels awesome. It just feels like he's thinking about the game sometimes in the way that we're thinking about the game. And I'm not naive enough to think like he's going to give every fan favorite a sweetheart deal. You saw this in this past offseason with how they played hardball with Pete Alonso, because the first baseman who's 30 years old on the free agent market with Scott Boras as his agent, that's a sort of a mixed bag these days with the way that teams think about handing out free agent contracts. And so they're not being, I think the phrase that Steve Cohen likes to use and many owners like to use is drunken sailors when they're spending money. But to have no limit and to have no kind of organizational philosophy of quote unquote prudence about how you're spending your money, I think that is just reinvigorating to a fan base that's like, we got to get one. You said we want to get one in 5 years. You said you want to be the Dodgers. Now put your money where your mouth is. And I've been honestly shocked at the fact that he has at almost every opportunity.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're spending so much money, so this doesn't line up perfectly. But the Mets feel like where I felt watching the Astros in like 2015, 2016, where it's like, they were right on the cusp right before. They've added the final pieces. Obviously, the Astros' final pieces were like, Evan Gaddis. It was not Juan Soto, but the team is still kind of rootable from everyone else's perspective, and so I'm happy for you. I think it is very fun to be good and also still have people like you. The Astros are past that point right now.
Why did something happen?
I don't remember. It doesn't really matter. I wasn't there, so no, it's so fun, and this is the best part about baseball season, is that everybody's got their rooting interest. But as you're kind of looking at this team right now, you mentioned, hey, look, there's some big new additions in in the off season. For you as a fan, what do you anticipate being kind of the face of the team? Is it still Lindor? Is he still the heart of everybody? Does it just take Soto 2 months of dominating before he becomes the face? Is the face Grimace? Like who is the identity of the Mets this year?
Yeah, is the face actually secretly Jesse Winker for the most most online cohort of Mets fans that you can possibly find? In some cases, yes. No, I mean, I think personally, I gravitate towards Lindor as the face of the team. You saw last year when this was partially because Edwin Diaz's injury in the World Baseball Classic, but when they eliminated the Phillies in the National League Division Series, a really rare thing happened, which is that everybody ran out to shortstop to celebrate with Lindor. He obviously had the go-ahead grand slam. I was at that game. I think I blacked out for a solid 30 minutes after that happened. He is the kind of leader who over time you start to understand what he's providing to a team, and that's leading by example, and that's being incredibly consistent, playing as much as possible, just being an all-around great player in all aspects of the game. I think, though, he's not kind of the traditional mold captain like Derek Jeter. This is my team. Mets fans will talk a lot about the cohort of Alonso and Nimmo having been there the longest and been in the lineup even back prior to the Lindor trade on many bad Mets teams and sticking around and still being committed to the organization. Now, you could argue that who else was going to give Brandon Nimmo 8 years, $160 million to stick around? But I think that continuity combined with the fact that I do think Lindor is respected by everybody who comes in and out, even the people who haven't been there for the entire time. It just feels like a pretty well-balanced team. But as you guys know, I mean, vibes turn on a dime. Like, they had great vibes last year, but Lindor has been part of bad vibe moments. Like, there was this fight that he had with Jeff McNeil a few years ago, or I guess at this point it's probably like 5 years ago. It's crazy how time flies. But I feel at least better about the fact that Lindor is probably going to be that leader. I feel confident about that. And as for Soto, I mean, of course, he's the highest paid player on the team, but he's 26, and I don't necessarily know that he was looking to go somewhere where he was going to be asked to be the old guy in the room, the wise guy in the room. He is just, what we're asking him to do is we're asking him to just be Juan Soto. 400 OBP, just be yourself. You don't even need to get better at defense. Just be out there. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be all right. And so I think that level of balance will serve the team well this year.
Just be Juan Soto. Real easy for him to do.
I mean, he's the only guy who can, right?
Yeah. We will talk more about the 2025 Mets and maybe get into that weird rotation that the Astros will see on opening weekend right after a message from our friends at Foul Territory.
If you're looking for premium clothes at an affordable price, you got to check out True Classic. AJ, you're rocking the True Classic shirt right now.
Oh, believe it. Look at this thing. Look at it. Soft. It fits perfect, even with these guns. Not too tight like Scott likes it. Little bit of room to move in there, right? Look, you can wear it under a suit. You can wear it out to dinner with some nice jeans. You can wear it to the gym if that's what your game is. Whatever it takes, this thing fits great, feels great. Great shirt.
The long sleeve Henny for these cold, kind of warm spring days. Perfect.
Yep. Build the perfect outfit in 5 minutes or less. Everything goes great together. Free shipping on all orders. It's designed to bring out your best features with the perfect fit. So, FT fam, whether you're bundling up for the cold or getting ready for spring, level up your style with clothes that actually fit right. Go to our exclusive link, trueclassic.com/foul to save. That's trueclassic.com/FOUL. Shop now and elevate your wardrobe today. FT fam, get after it.
So, Bobby, the Astros saw Clay Holmes on opening day last year and opening weekend last year in a little bit of a different role. He's going to start opening day for the Mets, which is not something I thought I'd ever say, and I don't think it's something you thought you'd ever say. What has happened to this rotation? Like, where is Kodai Senga? Where is Sean Manaea? Griffin Canning's going to start a game this weekend, and for full disclosure, the Astros were very interested in Griffin Canning at the trade deadline last year. They thought that was a buy low guy that they could really help. So I'm sure the Mets know something, just like the Astros did. But in short, what is this Mets rotation as we speak?
It's piecemeal. That's the word that I keep using. It's interesting. The funny part is I feel pretty good about Clay Holmes as a starter. I feel good about maximizing his pitch mix, and he has started in Major League Baseball. Of course, this is many years ago now, pre-pandemic, that he started Major League Baseball games, I believe. But I actually feel good about it, other than the fact that relies on him staying healthy for a whole season, which is always a question mark for anyone. The rest of the rotation is a bigger question. You brought up the name Kodai Senga. This is a guy who finished third in Cy Young in his rookie season in Major League Baseball. Of course, he's a little bit on the older side because he didn't come over right away. But, I think that everything out of the Mets camp has been, we need to take a little bit of the stakes out of it for this guy. Last year, he started this season on the injured list and wasn't able to return until about June. And when he did, he immediately hurt his calf and was out until the playoffs. And so you had that, I think he had a little bit of that feeling like, I have to come back and help out the guys who have been holding down the fort in my absence. And I think that, the Griffin Canning signing, the Clay Holmes signing is in a little bit more of an effort to, attack this starting rotation, this inning loads by committee, rather than trying to make Kodai Senga feel like you have to finish top 3 in Cy Young. Otherwise, we're going to be kind of screwed as a unit. And that way, you set the expectations a little bit more realistically than coming in and saving the whole unit. And if he is back in form, like you hope he will be, because he's had a full off season to kind of get back to his mechanics, to get a better feel for his body again, then everything is basically gravy at that point. Now that there's a lot of kind of ifs in that equation. Some of those ifs are, do the Mets actually know something about Griffin Canning like the Astros might have thought they did? I think many people think that knowledge is just throw fewer pitches, like throw your good pitches more, which that's definitely an oversimplification by a dumb guy on a podcast. And the Mets probably have like a million, data entries about why and why not this will work. But this is a test. I mean, I think that this is one of those things where it's like, yes, I trust you, David Stearns. You clearly have a track record of this at the MLB level, but also you're kind of doing a lot here. You're stretching yourself pretty thin and you're kind of shooting your shot. This is a little bit of like a Steph Curry half court pull up from David Stearns, this rotation. So we'll see if they actually bolster it throughout the season. Of course, they do have the ability to take on a starter if there's a team trying to get off money, or if they do feel like they can move off of a prospect because of the way that the division is shaking out, then that's on the table. And I think that everybody is always going to dream about that. It stung a little bit when the Red Sox sort of stepped in front of them in line and got Garrett Crochet, because I think a lot of people were dreaming on that. But what fan base wouldn't want to add a guy like Garrett Crochet? So don't want to be too selfish.
Yeah, I think you did just fine in free agency. So I think you have to wait a little bit before you can be upset about not getting any players, especially as the Astros lost 2 of their faces of the franchise. And so we're kind of in our own little bubble here in this podcast. It's mainly exclusively, I would argue, Astros fans who are listening, and then normally about one Dodger fan an episode that just comes in and writes like bang bang somewhere, which is fun. But what I guess I want to know what has trickled out to you as someone who is not in the bubble. I would love to know kind of what storylines you are aware of in Astros land versus kind of what we've been inundated with. So obviously Tucker's gone, Bregman's gone. Like, what else do you know about what's been going on with the Astros?
I mean, I think the interesting thing is that, I've obviously followed the Mets very closely, being a Mets fan. But then on Tipping Pitches, I think one thing that we are really tracking is kind of like the macroeconomic approach that different organizations are taking to the game, just the philosophies that have become en vogue versus out of favor in the league since we started doing the podcast 7 years ago. And the Astros are a really interesting example of that. I mean, I think they are sort of like, of this last 10 years or so, the text for like the tear it down rebuild and that working out. I think a lot of teams followed in their footsteps when it came to that, to less of a successful degree, I would argue. You're not just going to hit on all of these draft picks all of the time like the Astros did for a long time. But the thing that's been interesting to me is that philosophically, what it seems like from the outside is that they are not willing to re-sign their guys at a premium. They are very comfortable with the idea of letting guys walk, even if it creates a massive hole, or even if it creates sort of like a sour taste in the fans' mouths, because they're willing to say, hey, look at what we've done. Look at the track record. And I think that up until this point, that's a sort of hard thing to argue against. I know that the emotions of fandom are definitely valid in many of these cases. And I think Tucker is probably the one that it stings the most, because he just straight up was their best player. And like, they're probably not going to be able to replace him, at least right away, for the next couple years. So I think that is what has sort of trickled out into my world, at least in the way that we view baseball on Tipping Pitches, is that, this is an owner who likes to meddle and likes to make decisions and likes to have his voice heard, and that worked out really well for a while. And now you're kind of in the danger zone of like, we're sort of in the red here about whether or not this is going to work for the long term, and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I would say Astros fans are definitely aware of that. Like if you polled Astros fans, what are the percent chance that Framber Valdez, a guy who, is a perennial Cy Young contender, one of the best pitchers in baseball, what's the chances that he returns after this year when he's a free agent? I would bet it's in single digits that Astros fans think that he would come back. I mean, there's just no scenario that I can imagine that the Astros give him money. And it is weird that, maybe it's just Stockholm syndrome of everybody's like, yeah, that's just what the Astros do. It's not going to happen. And it's hard to argue because you mentioned even losing Tucker in right field. What are they going to do to replace him? Well, boy, do I have news for you, Bobby. Do you know who the Astros got in return and who everyone is very excited about here in Houston?
Well,
Has that made it out to you yet, or are we still holding on to the hype train over here?
well, I see here as I did my little research on Fangraphs roster resource that it looks like Cam Smith will slot into the right
Pew
field spot.
pew 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 pew. Yeah.
I
He
wonder
rules.
I wonder how you guys feel about the sort of ship of Theseus question of like the continuity between what the roster and the organization was at the height of when it's sort of the ascendancy of the fan favor versus now, and whether or not they still get to sort of coast off of that credit from that time period.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think the Astros have almost lucked into having people replace at the same position people who have left now, right? Like Correa leaves after all this time. Jeremy Pena immediately comes in and wins World Series MVP his rookie year, which is insane. He's obviously not as good as Correa, but to have that happen immediately is crazy. And then the rotation depth, every year they find some dude from the middle of nowhere that no one's ever heard of, and he's going to come up and be an all-star in the rotation. It makes no sense. They do it every year. Framber came out of nowhere. Ronel Blanco last year came out of nowhere and is awesome. And so you almost just assume that that's going to happen. And it almost feels like, oh, that's some voodoo within the organization. So I do think it still feels like the same continuation of the team, mainly because Jose Altuve is still here. Right. So that's the heart of the team.
And by
so
here, you mean way out there in left field.
Way out there. He is on the field
around.
somewhere.
He's looking for the ball. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll be there. Chandler's got to see him in person play left field, which I'm jealous of. I can't wait. I want to see him I want to see what is like what he's throwing to the kid over down the left field foul line to warm up beforehand. I want to know what he's doing with the fans. I wish that the Nets weren't there. I'm okay for safety reasons, but I would love that Altuve just comes down and is shaking hands or whatever. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I do think it still feels like, the same core, even though it's not. Even, Jordan wasn't there when the Astros first got good, but it feels like he was because it's just kind of been this continuation the whole time.
Yeah, I also think like they've become a victim of their own success and that they made the sport look so easy from 27. Well, let's take 2017 out of it. From 2018 to about 2023, they made the sport look really easy. And, when you live here, this is a football city. This is a football town. This is a part of the country that is football mindset. And a lot of their fans have kind of adopted that as, if they don't make the World Series, then it's a massive failure. Like they live and die on, these games in May that are relatively meaningless. And I think it should be noted too, that the Astros ascension came right when the Rockets had traded James Harden, started their rebuild. The Texans were a dumpster fire for until they drafted CJ Stroud, that all coincided with the Astros ascension. So they were the only ticket in town for a very long while. And now, they've still got the same expectations that they had in the fans do from 2018 to 2023. But, I don't think they have the roster to meet those expectations. Like this is a diminished roster that does not have as much depth. Their minor league system has been just completely ravaged by graduation, by trades, by just underperformance. And they're not in a position organizationally right now to maybe meet or exceed the expectations that they set in 2018 through 2023.
Mhm.
Now, you saw that by them trading Kyle Tucker, because that was a completely out of character thing. Like you guys have mentioned all these free agents that have left. Like Correa played his last year under team control here. Bregman, the same thing. Springer, Keuchel, like all these homegrown guys, like they resisted trading all these guys for picks, or not for picks, for prospects. They realized, they looked at where they were and knew that they did not have a Cam Smith coming. And look, Cam Smith has been unbelievable, but I'm not sure one dude is going to fix this. And, I think that was a more telling sign than anything, that they understand they're going to have to do things a little bit differently. And they're maybe not in that same position that they were for the last 6 or 7 years, where the expectation was World Series or bust. And Lance McCullers Jr., one of the two guys that's a holdover from that 2017 team, basically acknowledged it in spring training. He was like, yeah, maybe this year we report to camp and we're just kind of like, all right, let's get off to a good start and let's, see how April and May and June go. And instead of the last 7 years when they reported to camp, it was, we're winning the world. If we don't win the World Series, this is a failure.
Yeah. It's a fascinating inflection point for an organization such as the Astros too, because I think in particular, because they play in the AL West, no one has necessarily come and ripped it out of their hands. So it's not like you can even justify a total teardown at this point, because you could win 89 and still get in. And then at that point, if your guys get hot at the right time, then, this window is still open for a couple more years. So I don't know which team we lay the blame, which team's feet we lay the blame of that the most in the AL West. I know which team I do. But looking at you, Jerry DiPoto and the Mariners. But I think that there's no organizational justification for going in total reverse. Now you could argue that trading Kyle Tucker is that's definitively going in reverse. And I would argue that, but I still think that the roster is just good, not great, and good, not great can still win you a division in today's game.
Let me remind you that this team started 12-24 last season and won the American League West.
I know. And I was among the people, throwing dirt on them, pouring dirt on their grave 40 games into the season. And I was wrong, but it just looked like they didn't have, frankly, any good pitchers on the roster at the time. And they were able to get a handle on it. So, do you guys think they're going to win the division this year? Or do you think that they are the favorite to win the division?
I think they win the division until someone else wins the division. I think you just go into every year. I think that if somebody snapped their fingers tomorrow and replaced all of the current Astros roster and swapped it with the Oakland A's roster, and the A's just played in the Astros uniforms at Daikin Park, I think that team would win that's how strong the voodoo is. It feels for the Astros. I mean, there is something to be said about you've just done it so much that it's an expectation. It's not a mountain that you have to climb. It's the hill that you're already on top of, and somebody has to come knock you off as an organization. And until somebody does that, there's certainly not a team that I would say the Astros are scared of yet, or are, feeling like they have to climb to reach them. Chandler, I know Chandler pretends he likes the A's, but other than that.
And I totally 100% agree with Ty. And until someone else wins it, I'm not going to pick against them. Do I think do I like their chances just outright with this roster to win the division? Like I can't sit here and confidently say I think they're the favorites. I think the Rangers, sneakily did some nice things. They just get some of these guys to bounce back. I mean, I don't think last year, like everybody in their lineup outside of Corey Seager had the worst year of their career. Like I don't think that's going to happen again. Jacob deGrom's arm is healthy for the time being, which is a big deal. The Mariners, I mean, I know we all made fun of Jerry Dipoto a lot, but look at they started to hit toward the end of the season. It was too little, too late, but like they started to really hit toward the end of the season once Scott Service was fired, once Edgar Martinez got in there as the hitting coach. Like they did start to hit, and they returned. They didn't do anything in the offseason, but they return everybody. And I mean, that pitching staff, just like I said, I don't think the Rangers are going to have every guy in their lineup outside of one have the worst year of their career. Do I think the Mariners are going to go have those 5 guys have that sort of year and not get hurt the whole year? I don't think that happens. I mean, you're already seeing it with George Kirby. George Kirby's going to start the year on the IL. So, again, until someone dethrones the Astros, it's hard for me to pick against them, but this is going to be the most difficult test they've had in a long time. Bobby, I wonder, like, we're talking about the Astros within the West, like, I mean, you would think like if the Mets go out and spend $700 million on a player, like you would think like the goal, like you have to win the division, but like that's a tough one. I mean, the Phillies, the Braves, like, I mean, where do they stand in this division, or are they the favorites to win that division?
Absolutely not. Like almost under no circumstances. I think most people would probably put them third among those 3 teams. It's tough. I mean, narratively, that's a challenge. But I think, it's a harken back to what we were talking about earlier with Steve Cohen. I don't think that he necessarily is the type of owner who's going to get scared by the fact that it's not happening right away from the money that he's spending. I think this really is like he's trying to become an institution. That's what you do when you're trying to become the Dodgers. That's how you create longitudinal success as an organization, is you say, I'm willing to invest this money over the course of 15 years, and I'm not going to panic when it doesn't work out right away. You've seen this happen countless times with countless organizations in all sports, really. Like, it's not just limited to baseball. We saw this with the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, Prokhorov came in and he was like, we're going to win it all. I'm spending all my money. Oh, wait, what's my tax bill? And Cohen is one of the rare exceptions to that. So I don't think that they're going to panic from the fact that they're not the favorite to win the division. I think that they have a good chance, a better chance than if they didn't have Juan Soto, that's for sure. And with the expanded wild card, there's always going to be a slot for them if they play good enough baseball. I just think that the Phillies and the Braves are at just more of a peak in their contention window. I think you could argue that the Phillies might be slightly even past their peak in their contention window, but they're still so incredible and their rotation is amazing. So particularly when you look at that element of the team in comparison to the Mets, it's just like, oh, you guys have been kind of big boys for longer than us in terms of roster construction. And Atlanta, I mean, look, the projection systems always really loved Atlanta. They have a lot of injury concerns. They have a lot of bigger question marks than I think just pure numbers would tell you. But even still, even if they lose a couple of those guys, they're kind of in that same boat that you were talking about, Chandler, where it's like with the Rangers, do we really expect everybody in the Atlanta lineup to just have one of the worst seasons of their careers again? Probably not. I'm not lucky enough, I'm not lucky enough for that to happen. So I think that you have to, if I'm being objective about it, say that they are third from a reasonable perspective. But of course, I mean, everything can change at the blink of an eye. I mean, nothing is guaranteed with either of those Phillies and Braves rosters. Maybe the Phillies just get frustrated and the lineup is too whiff heavy and they just decide to shake things up and it doesn't work out. So I think the Mets have at least put themselves in a position to play spoiler to 2 of the best teams in not just the National League, but all of baseball.
I mean, the Phillies could be wiped out just by raw milk, right? I mean,
sure could. Over on Tipping Pitches, the way that we preview the season is because we're silly and we like to have fun with it. Is we created a bingo card of 24 things in a free space that we predicted could or maybe are likely to happen this year, and one of those things was an IL stint from someone drinking raw milk and getting sick from it. And that was one of those things. So I'm looking at you, Bryce Harper.
It bodes well for you and the Mets that it seems like every couple of years someone from the NL East beats the Astros in the World Series. So
I'm waiting for my turn, Tyler.
yeah. And Juan Soto's already done it once, so he's got the institutional knowledge to figure that out. But yeah, I'm just ready, man. It's funny having watched the Astros with such high expectations for the last decade. Essentially, this is like the most fun that I feel like a season will be for me, because at least in the past few years, because the expectations were so high, the regular season almost didn't matter, or it didn't feel important, because they were so much better than everyone else in the division that it just, you knew they were going to win the division by 15 games. And it was just a matter of, okay, when you get to the playoffs, what's going to happen? But now it feels like, hey, the opening series against the Mets, this matters. Like, these are two good teams, but we got to kind of see where they're at. And who knows, it might be a 2-game race at the end of the year. And so every game is going to matter, not only for the Astros, but for the Mets as well. I think that's going to be a really close division.
Not waking up until May isn't really an option for either of these teams this year.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And you mentioned it already. Everybody needs to be listening to Tipping Pitches. It's one of my favorite shows. I meant to bring it, I forgot, but I pulled out my Unionize the Miners shirt. I got one that was pre-trademarked before y'all got in trouble. So I have an original.
Trouble? No, we didn't get no.
But Tipping Pitches is awesome. Everybody, if you're listening to this and you need a suggestion for a league-wide, really great coverage of baseball, and also just some goofballs who are fun to listen to, Tipping Pitches is your place. I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you, Tyler. That's very kind.
If you would like to listen to goofballs that don't know what they're talking about, you can listen to Crush City Territory 3 times a week in the regular season. So we're starting. This is going to be our first 3 podcast a week episode. Tune in. We will not be doing game-by-game breakdowns, guys. We're not going to go live after opening day to overreact to however Framber Valdez pitches or who Joe Espada gives the 7th inning to. Like, we're not going to do that. But we'll be back, and we'll work out a schedule that allows us to really evaluate this season with enough sample size, with enough kind of measured takes throughout this season to keep you guys satiated. So please rate and review us on Apple. Please subscribe on YouTube at Crush City Territory so you can get alerted whenever we post a new episode. And we'll be talking to you guys soon from Daikin Park at opening day. Thank you, guys.
Bye.